Good day everyone, this is Joshua Haji, Software Engineer Supervisor here at Pixelate, and I'm here to talk about Vue.js. Beautiful Vue, isn't it? Indeed. So what is Vue? Vue is basically a progressive framework used for building user interfaces. So what do you mean by progressive? Progressive means it can be plugged into any part of existing code. Also, the core library focuses on the Vue layer only, leaving the application logic untouched, if so desired. Also, it can power sophisticated single-page applications, meaning Vue holds us the capacity to create application logic and attach it to the Vue as well. So why Vue? Basically, if you choose to learn Vue, you will have an easy time learning it. It is scalable, it is flexible, it's simple to use, it has a great community, and it has great reactivity as well. For the easy learning curve, you only have to remember three blocks: the template block, the script block, and the style block. Simple as that. For scalability and flexibility, you can stretch your Vue app in many ways unimaginable. It can cater almost any kind of use case that you want it to take. For simplicity, it's sort of similar to the easy learning curve because you only have to remember three blocks. For the community, Vue has a strong and growing community as of today, which makes it a great choice for learning. Also, for reactivity, we'll talk more about that later. So how does it work? Basically, it all boils down to three blocks, like I said: the template block, the script block, and the style block. The template block is used for HTML elements, for example div, span, h1, so on and so forth. You put all of your HTML elements here. For the script block, it is used for JavaScript, and it also uses the Vue script syntax. For example, you have to create an object which exports the object with the key name, methods, data, so on and so forth. But still, it all boils down to JavaScript. For the style block, it is used for CSS styling. Also, CSS styles are applied only to the component. Meaning, if you create a style here, for example, this text-red, and you use it on the element span right here on the top, the class will not render on other elements because it is scoped to the specific component. For example, you want to create an element where you would apply a specific class only for the specific element. This use case is a very good example for using scoped elements like the text red. So, what do you mean by declarative rendering? Because basically Vue uses that term a lot. So what is declarative rendering? Declarative rendering is a system that enables Vue to declaratively render data to the DOM, meaning it links your data and the DOM under the hood, therefore making the DOM reactive. So what do you mean by that? When you say declarative rendering, you declare a variable right here in your HTML block. Here in this example, we have a message declared. So also, in the script tag, as you can see, we have a data which returns a message object, the string hi. Since the value of the message is hi and the message is declared as a block on the HTML will render the specific string, making it reactive. Meaning, whatever the value of the message variable is during runtime, it instantly displays that value here in this message and the HTML tag. Very useful for reactive and for smoother flowing interfaces. So here, let me show you an example as to how we do it and how you do it, how to create an example app. So first, we have to open our terminal here. Then, with Node.js installed, we basically have to type npm install -g at vue/cli. After typing that, it will prompt you to install Vue CLI. Since I have mine already installed, it will just simply run through the process and continue as usual. Now that it's loaded, here you can see that we have the following folders: the node modules, the public folder, which holds all the static files, and the src folder, which holds all of the app files itself. Also, you will notice the assets folder. This is where static assets goes, for example, images, icons, and pictures. For the components folder, this is where your Vue components will be stored. And you will notice there's an app.vue, which is your main app, and then the main.js, which is your bootstrap. So before we start, we need to edit our package.json first. Then here in the serve line, line number 6, we need to append a host parameter. So what do you mean by this parameter? It basically tells your npm, your node, to host your app in the local host. With that in mind, now save, and then now it's time to boot our app. In order to run your app, you need to just type in your terminal, which is in the same directory, for this case, d temp test project. You need to type npm run, then serve. Now that it's running, you can just simply go to the local address, which is localhost port 8080. So here you can see that this is your very first Vue.js app. Now, let's put that. Next, we'll show you how reactivity works. For the reactivity, you will see that in order to do that, you need to bind your data variable to your HTML. So how do we do that? In order to do that, you can see this tag right here. This basically tells you that there is a variable declared on the DOM, which is message. And below, you can see a props. So what is this props? Later on, I'll run you through with props and as to what it does. For now, let's first create our first component. So we go here, right click new, then we create a Vue component. In your case, you just create a file, and then you can name it as, choose any name you like, or in this case, test component. And there you have it. You have a test component.vue. So in your IDE, you will create a file inside the components folder, and then you name it however you like, and then append a .vue, meaning it is a Vue component. Now, once you create your Vue component, it needs to have these 3 blocks: the template block, this one, the script block, this one, and the style block, which is this one. So basically, your template block contains all the HTML elements you would like to put into it. So for now, let's append a static content, which is a span. And then let's add hi there. Now you have your own element. And for the script tag, you see a default and the name. The name must be the same with the file name. As you can see, we have test component.vue, and the script name is test component. For the style, let's leave it blank for now. Now we have our own component. So how do we bind it to the app? First, we go to the app.vue, and as you can see, it has an import hello world component, meaning it imported a hello world component to the app itself. So for now, we'll just have to replace the hello world with our own app, rather with our own component. So we put test component here, and then we replace the file name here with our own component, which is this one. So there you go. Next, we would replace the component imported here with our own component. And then finally, we copy this component and then we replace the component rendered here. And then we remove this one. So there you have it. You now have your own component inside an app. So if you take a look at your code, you can see that it's there. Hi there. Now, let's talk about reactivity. So how do you achieve reactivity? First, you need to declare a data function in your script. This function tells Vue what data should it bind to the component. In order to bind the data to the component, you need to first create an object which returns a key value pair. For this instance, let's create message, which is currently, let's say, hello there. So it's a string. With that, as you can see, we declared a message in our data. In order to use it in our template, we replace our static hi there with a double bracket. And then we put our message block, our message variable here, up here. Hit save, and then you'll see that the data gets replaced. Now, in order to show you reactivity, let's try changing this value to hi there. So we replace hello with hi, hit save, and then you'll see the value update. So there's your reactivity, meaning whatever the content of this variable here is automatically displayed here during runtime. If the value changes, the displayed value also changes, meaning it's reactive. So next, how do you see reactive in live setting? So in order to see it in a live setting, we'll create a way for the users to input. So let's put an input here. Now, in order to bind our input to the data, we need to add a vModel. So what does vModel mean? Basically, we're telling Vue to bind this variable into an element. So in order to bind this one here, we need to put message. So now your input is binded to the data right here. So meaning whatever you put in this message, or rather in the input, will be transferred to this message, therefore will be rendered here. To see that in action, let's go back to our render, and as you can see, we have an input bar here. If I type something appears as well to the side, meaning it's reactive. Yes, so there you go. So it's reactive now. Next, in order to make things interesting, we add an event. So what do you mean by events? One example of an event is a click. It's the most basic form of event, and we use it all the time. So how do you trigger a click? We use a button for that one. So we have a button here, in which we attach a click event. So click, and then we attach a function to handle that click. So let's say handle click. So as you can see, it's highlighted. Next, we will create a method. So what are methods? Methods are basically functions that the component can call to whenever it needs one. So in this case, we put our handle click here. Now it's a function. So now, what this means is every time you click the button, it will run the handle click function here. Therefore, it will alert. It will perform the function. So for now, let's append an alert to show you how it works. So with that, as you can see, there's a button here. Let's put a content inside. So let's say click me. So there you go. Now that it's there, if I click it, nothing happens. Right? Yes. Basically, that's how it should be. Because we need to refresh the page. There you go. Next, in order to handle it properly, we can assign the button to the message. What do I mean by this? We can use events to show or hide elements based on the variable state. To do that, we need to create a div. And then we put the span message side of it. Next, we need to add a vShow. Now, what is vShow? vShow is basically a view directive which is answerable by a true or a false. If the variable you attach here is true, then it will show the element. If not, it will hide it. So let's put here is div shown. So right there. And then we copy here and then we add it to the data. And like I said, it needs to be either true or false. So for now, let's put it to false. There you go. That means that the div won't show itself unless the isDivShown becomes true. Now, how do you trigger it? Rather, how do you flip the switch from false to true? We use the handle click for that one. So we use this, meaning the component itself, then we point to the isDivShown variable, and then we flip its value, meaning the falsy one. There you go. Now, if we type here, if we type here, there's supposed to be something appearing, right? So there's none, meaning the element here, which is this one, is hidden. Now, in order to display this one, we need to click here. So there you go. Next, we can also bind classes. What do you mean by classes? We can attach states. Rather, we can attach dynamic classes to elements. What do I mean by that? For example, we want our span to appear red when, let's say, the button is clicked, or rather, when there is no content. Maybe let's put it in the input instead. Let's make it this way. So we want our input border to be red when there is no content, and then it turns green when there is content. So how do we do that? First, we need to declare a class. So let's put a class here. Let's say border green. And let's add a border with a 1 pixel solid green. So now we have a green border. Next, we add a red border. So with that, we also add a border with a 1 pixel solid. This time it's red. So now we have two classes, a green and a red. Now how do I bind that class to a specific element? We need to add a class here, this one. So this is how you add classes, right? But here's the catch. We add a semicolon here, meaning our class is dynamic. What do you mean by dynamic? Meaning we can attach specific use cases for classes, or rather we can turn classes on and off based on a truthy value. In this case, we need to show the class border green if there's a content and border red if there is none. There you go. So how do we do that? So for this one, if you put a class with this symbol right here, you may add an object. So what does the object contain? Basically the class name itself, and then the condition for triggering that class. So for this, we put a border green, which is this one, our class below here, and now we add a condition. So what would be the condition that will make the input have a border green? So in this case, we need to check if the message, this one, is not equal to an empty string. Like that. Next, we need to use our other class, which is border red. So we grab this one, and then we add another class, which is border red, and then we add a condition to it. So what would make border red appear? Basically when message is equal to an empty string. There you go. Now if we take a look at this, you will see that the border is red because there's no content in it. But if I type something, it becomes green. So you can change classes on the fly. You can trigger elements on the fly. You can change elements on the fly. without refreshing the page. That's what makes Vue reactive. Also, there's what you call a list rendering. For example, I have 10 items and I would like to show them. Now, how do I do that? First, we need to declare an array here. So let's say fruits. So let's declare a fruits array. And then we put objects in it. Let's say an object with a name of, let's say, apple. And then another object with the name banana. And then another object with the name carrot. So now we have three items. So how do we display that here? First, we need to create a div element to contain all the items rather, and then we create an unordered list. Now that we have an unordered list, we can now have a list item. So for this one, we attach a v-for statement. Now what does v-for stands for? It's basically a for loop. So in order for us to be able to loop an array, we need to attach the array itself, which is fruits, and then the iterating item, which is fruit. So what does this mean? Basically, the fruits, this one, is the array which contains the objects, and the fruit is the current object being iterated. So for the first iteration, you have an apple. The second iteration, you have banana. And then the third iteration, you have carrot. Next, we need to append a key. Now, what is this key? This key is used by Vue in order to know which objects have stayed or have been removed within the array. It's a sort of internal tracking for the Vue. Also, it needs to be not, not so much, but it is suggested that the key must be unique. In our case, the names are unique. So therefore, we can use it as a key. So in order to use that as a key, we need to get our current iterative item, which is fruit, and then we take its name. There you go. Next, we render now the fruit's name. There you go. Now, if we take a look at the code, as you can see, it has rendered three items: apple, banana, and carrot. So that's how you do iterative rendering, which is very useful for rendering, let's say, tables with rows and columns. So it's very useful. Also, it is possible to alter the objects. Rather, we can add an object to our fruits right here. So how do we do that? Well, first, we need to modify our input. See this one? Now, instead of binding it to the message, which is right here, rather, we change the message into a fruit input. That way, we can track what the user is going to input. Now, we have a container for the input. Next, we have our handle click here. So instead of having a click key, we should use an add fruit. Meaning, if we click the button and the fruit input has a content, then we add that fruit to the list. So we comment this out for a while, and then in order to do that, we grab this value, which is that fruit input, and then we append it here. How do we do that? We grab the array itself, and then we create push. Now, push is a prototype of the fruits. What do you mean by prototype? It's an internal function of an array which allows you to push an object or anything inside an array. So in this case, we're going to push an object. And then, before we push this, we need to append a name to it. So, there you go. Now, going back, if we type here, let's say pear, we click add fruit, then the fruit appears. If we say, let's say, now let's see grapes. Let's add some grapes. If you click add fruit, the grapes gets appended. So with this in mind, you can almost create anything. For example, you can create to-do lists. You can create, let's see, a table where you can input items and the items gets appended to the table. So with this information, you can sort of grasp as to what you can do with it and as to how far you can take it. So for today, that's all for now. See you next time.